We all know the Nintendo Entertainment System, the little gray box that brought us minutes of excitement, hours of entertainment, and a lifetime of memories. But I wanted to cover something today that some people might not think of: accessories. During the lifespan of the NES, there were some insane accessories created. Some improved upon the controller, some were novelty attempts at standing out, and some were for accessibility. You never really knew what was going to come out. Now, for a long time, almost 9 months, I spent as much time as I could trying to piecemeal together various NES accessories for the purpose of this video. But guess what? It gets expensive really fast. That being said, I don't own all of them, but the topic of today's episode is every NES accessory I can talk about or own for the NES. Let's begin. Now, before we get into this, there are a few different types of NES accessories, many of which can be narrowed down to 6 different groups. Number 1, wired controllers. Number 2, wireless controllers. Number 3, turbo controllers. Number 4, light gun stuff. 5, quality of life accessories. And 6, dumb shit. So I'm going to go through each of these categories and talk about what I can find, and in some cases what I own and what happens when I use them. Cool? Cool. Wired controllers. Now, before we get to the weird stuff, let's talk about the good old-fashioned simple-ass comfy controller that is the original NES controller. This is the NES 004. It's the standard controller that was packed in with the NES. It's small, comfortable to use, and has a regular D-pad with a rubber select and start button. The 2 buttons on the right are B and A respectively, and they are bright red, kind of hard to miss them. So many of my childhood memories and quite a few of my adult memories were played on this controller, and I love it. But there was a second version, and it came with the second version of the NES. It was known as the New Style NES, or the NES 101, but the colloquial name is the Top Loader. When they released the New Style NES, they updated the controller to be different. Many people call this the dog bone because it looks like one, true story. Now, I don't have one of these, but one of the issues that a lot of folks mention is that the B and A buttons are at a slanted angle, and that hurts your hand, especially when you have tons of muscle memory for NES games where the buttons are left and right. But when I emulate NES games, I use a SNES controller, so I don't think it'd be any different. Oh well. The next accessory I don't own is actually really expensive. You remember Arkanoid, the Better Breakout? That's what this controller is for. It basically emulated the arcade controls, and I did ask in a previous video a long time ago if the controller operated faster than the NES controller, and many people said that it did to them. Now, in looking at it, it's literally just a knob and a button. I'm assuming the button would be used for the laser power-up if we had it. It's cute and effective, can't complain about it. I do know that the Famicom actually had a second version, and it was like baby blue. It was for Arkanoid 2 Return of Dough, but it was only in Japan. I don't know if it works for the first game, but it might be worth looking into. You know fighting sticks, right? Like Hori? I used to have one. It made playing arcade games on the computer tremendous fun, but what if I told you there existed an arcade controller for the NES? What about the Super Nintendo? What about the Mega Drive? All of those, in combination. What gives? That's what the Battle Station 2 is. It's a multi-platform arcade stick created by Multicoin Australia in 1993, which is awfully late for the NES era. But it did come with adapters for all the consoles I mentioned, plus Commodore 64 and Amiga. To be honest, for what it is, it's kind of a good deal. Low-key, I want to try to find one, but it's a really rare find, which screams to me that some asshole is going to want $10,000 for it. I love joysticks because in platforming games or shooters, it just feels right, you know? I feel it offers more tangible control over the motion of our characters or whatever we're controlling. But if you take the joystick and put it on shitty low-quality plastic and crank a degradable sticker on there with membrane buttons and 2 triggers, you get the Epix 500XJ. So we have this hand-sized hunk of plastic with, like I said, a membrane sticker over it. The start and select buttons are kind of there, and there's also an auto fire button. The B and A buttons are actually on the underside of the controller. And to be honest, this controller was cool for about 5 minutes until the hand cramps happened. If you're playing a game that requires constant hitting of buttons, and you want to make it physically painful, use a 500XJ. Other than that, it's a relatively well-known controller with different versions for Apple II, Commodore 64, and supposedly the 2600. Also, fun fact, it had 2 different releases. I own the Epix 500XJ, but you might have seen this called the Speed King as well, which good for them for changing it, because there's nothing fast about this thing. This one is actually pretty cool. It's a Famicom-styled controller released by Hudson Soft, the same folks who made Bomberman, Bonk, Far East of Eden, tons of products through the year. The Sonusui SSS has a turbo controller capability and a headphone jack at the bottom. The way you get the sound is to plug the RCA cable from your controller into the audio jack. Now, mine doesn't work. I took it apart and it's corroded to shit inside, but if this was working as advertised, this would probably be the coolest controller for the NES of the era. Perhaps one of the most infamous wired controllers out there, the Miracle Piano is a sight to behold. Now, I don't own one because the cost of buying one plus shipping it is fucking horrible. The piano itself is a keyboard with 49 keys. The standard is 88, but for the purpose of teaching people piano basics, you don't really need that big of a piano. The game itself isn't that bad, and between me and you, it does its job as a teaching tool. A lot of people sleep on this game because it's educational, but to me, it's one of the best out there for what it does. Many people know about this being an NES accessory, but the Miracle Piano teaching system also came out for DOS, Genesis, Amiga, Super Nintendo, and the Mac computer, and it was even updated with a program known as the Piano Discovery software. This is a cool thing to own. I just don't. It's time to see what Bandai could contribute to the controller mix, and that is the Mega. The Mega is the #1 most convoluted bullshit controller I've ever seen. This is 100% reinventing the wheel, and for what? We only need 2 red buttons and a D-pad. Start and select would be nice too, but the Mega overcomplicates the hell out of the standard controller. The D-pad is cheap, the A and B buttons feel normal, and the start and select buttons are cheap as fuck too. But the big ones in the top are mode, lock, and level. If you push lock and another button, it locks down that button. You have to manually unlock them if you want to play with that button again. There's also a rapid fire mode which aligns with what a turbo controller does. There's a way to limit ammunition as a challenge with your friends, a timer mode if you want to limit the time you play, a memory mode that remembers password sequences, slow-mo which acts as a slow mode, and a top secret mode. How do we get that? Well, we set it to game 1 mode, push the button as much as we can in 10 seconds, thus unlocking top secret mode, which is a little mini game in the LCD window. The one thing that sucks about this controller is that it's battery operated to the core. With no batteries, this is just a glorified paperweight. Well, I have a power pad, but it doesn't work with any of the games that I have. In fact, out of the 11 games that it supported, only 6 were released in the United States, one of which is one of the most expensive games out there, Stadium Events. So if you want that, just buy World Class Track Meet. It's the same game, and if you lived in Europe, tough titties, you only had 2 games. Think of the power pad as the granddaddy to the DDR dance mat. It has 2 sides, side A, which has 8 dots of which 2 are red, and side B, which was more commonly used, with 12 buttons, 6 of which are red and 6 of which are blue. To my knowledge, there aren't that many games that use side A, but it existed in the off chance someone programmed something for it. Again, I don't own any games that are compatible with this, so one day I look forward to making an episode all about this. There were tons of NES-centric products made by Quickshot. In fact, I know off the top of my head 5, each with their own unique aspects. This particular one is the 126, and the only people I could see having fun with this are coaches that had absolute boners for their stopwatch and couldn't isolate work from home. The A and B buttons are on the shoulder, there's this random disc in the bottom, and by the way, that's our D-pad, and we have a start and select bar at the top. It balances over both, and much like the Epix 500, it's kind of counterintuitive. It just gives you hand cramps and the buttons sometimes stick. I'm assuming they're all gunked up with God knows what from the 80s, but they are very cheap plastic buttons. Quickshot may have had their weird controllers, especially with the 126, but their bread and butter involved flight sticks, of which there are a few for the NES. Most of them look like traditional flight sticks, the usual vertical stick with a massively obvious trigger. Top Gun had it, so everything else had to, right? That's what the premise for the Quickshot 1 and 2 were. Both of them were standard, and to my knowledge, there's tons of them that I won't be able to cover. I know there was a baseline Quickshot for the NES, and it was great. I also know that there was a Quickshot 12, which basically looked the same, but the weird one is the Quickshot Aviator 2. What happened to Aviator 1? Apparently it's on the Sega Master System, probably for Afterburner, but the second one, it was on the NES. It looks like a civil aircraft yoke with a stupid blue ball in the middle just in case you wanted to see your aircraft turning the way you obviously turn the yoke. There's some buttons, and honestly, I kinda want one. Again, there are like 13 quick shots out there, and they're all basically the same thing done 13 times. Everyone had to be different, and that was none the more obvious than with Bishu's Ultimate Super Stick. This was branded as an arcade stick, and it might look like it supports 2 players, but it doesn't. This is a 1-player controller that accommodates either left-handed or right-handed players. It has a dial-less speed auto-fire, which is cool, so it's technically a turbo controller. It has a massive joystick in the middle and 2 big-ass red buttons on both sides. I can already tell just by looking at the picture that this thing was 100% uncomfortable to hold. Now, it was released for the NES, but there were versions for the Sega Master System as well as the TurboGrafx 16. There was even a remote control one for the Sega Master System as well. Got a fucking zinger for you here, literally. It was another creation from Bishu, one of 2 different flight stick options that I know. Now the Zinger is much like the Quick Shot. It's got 4 suction cups that stop sucking in the 90s like Marilyn Chambers, so good luck getting this on the desk. But for the most part, it works, sometimes. I noticed that when I played Top Gun, the programming goes dog shit. Sometimes the game even crashes. And that might be because there's something weird going on inside of the controller itself. Hell, I can hear something moving around when I shake it. The controller itself features an auto fire that, believe it or not, is slower than most turbos, and 2 big buttons. And guess what? They do the same thing. Say it with me, kids. It's redundant. The stick also took some Viagra too, because it's stiffer than a broomstick in a hammock, but I guess it would work. There's also another version called the Zoomer. The Zoomer is another one that kind of fits the bill for this as well, but it's presented in a much more traditional yoke, like one you would see for a Cessna. I don't own one, but it looks much more simple than the Zinger. Wireless controllers. Acclaim was fairly big on doing what they could to break into the industry. Hell, they even named themselves Acclaim so that they could be alphabetically above any competitor that started with an A, such as Accolade or the very well-known Activision. Why? Because that's what the creators of Activision did when they left Atari, so some weird tradition was born from it. Now, Acclaim was primarily known for publishing games, but they did create some accessories. The first is the Acclaim Remote Controller, starting off hot by calling out the oppression of wires. Well, we have a controller, and we have an infrared receiver. That receiver gets plugged into the NES, and that's not too bad. Kind of just hangs out there. The controller is thick, just shy of an inch, and it's got a lot going on here. A raised D-pad, a tiny start and select button, and the usual B and A. I find it interesting that there's a power switch. That's nice for power conservation. And I see this triangle thing here. I'm assuming that's a turbo function, but how does it work? Well, we need to open this to put batteries in it, which is going to be hard because I don't think this thing has been opened since the dawn of mankind. Took some prying off with a screwdriver, and these contacts are oxidized to shit. Might need to restore them. But as you can see, it takes 4 AAA batteries. 4! The lights burn out, but it does work. Kind of. Trivia time. Do you know what other household item is battery controlled, uses infrared, and has buttons? A fucking TV remote, which is exactly what this is. Oops. Well, we just talked about Acclaim, and they made another little contraption known as the Double Player. It's called that because it came with 2 controllers. This looks really different though. It's blue and wireless, which Acclaim never really managed to figure out what the fuck wireless controllers are supposed to do. But to be honest, infrared technology for video gaming really wasn't where it needed to be ambitious or support a third-party controller. But I will say this actually works. Kind of. You have to maintain a line of sight, or else it doesn't work. This also runs off of 4 AAA batteries, which are kind of the missionary position of batteries, just boring as hell. The receiver is more efficient though. The problem is the cables are kind of short, so I need to wrap them around the NES to keep it aimed forward. Mine's pretty beat up, and I can tell people had tons of fun with it, and that's the only reason why it's chipped. Next up is Camerica's Freedom Connection. What is it? Well, it's basically a NES satellite. Other controllers use the receiver directly, such as Acclaim's wireless remote and the Double Player, but not Camerica. No, they wanted you to have the freedom to move around. So how did they do that? Well, we have a receiver. It plugs into player 1 and 2's ports on the NES. The transmitter, well, it's this thing. We plug in the controller and then we wear it on our belt. Yeah, Arya got a kick out of this. But you know what's crazy? It works really well, like stupid well. I actually really enjoy this. The reach is actually pretty far as long as it has line of sight. It works, which is to be expected. It uses 4 AAA batteries, which obviously won't last too long, but so far this is the best option for wireless play I've seen so far. Also, there's a Freedom deck that's mentioned on Wikipedia, but I can't find it anywhere. So let's talk about 2 more interesting Camerica ripoffs. Ever heard of the Freedom Pad? It's just a carbon copy of Acclaim's remote control. I personally don't own one, and I can't find that many reviews of it. Additionally, Camerica made a Freedom Stick, which is basically a carbon copy of the NES Advantage, but it's wireless and also missing the slowdown button. Behold, the Whizmaster! Emphasis on whiz, this thing fucking sucks. It takes 4 batteries, it's infrared, but to me, it has the worst joystick setup I've encountered on any controller. I tried this, so did Aria, and you really have to crank it down. I'm positive that if I even tried to play anything with this, I would break the controller. It would just snap in half. It's not good at all, which is a shame because you know people probably paid a lot of money for this monstrosity. Turbo controllers. The NES controller was awesome. It fit really well in your hand and it had buttons that were easy to press, but as humans, we were limited in how fast we could push those buttons. So naturally, a turbo function was something that people desired, and Nintendo answered the call with 2 specific controllers, the NES Advantage and the NES Max, and they are both incredibly different. The NES Advantage is kind of big. Chungus! Well, right off the bat, it has a joystick. It also has a B and A button, the size of which reminds me of those old people remotes with the oversized buttons. We have 2 turbo engagement buttons, and we can control the level of turbo with these radial knobs. On the right, we have a way to select between player 1 and 2, but that doesn't make much sense if you're using the NES because this particular item requires both of the controller ports. I'm guessing if you were using an NES 4 square, the multi-tap equivalent for the NES, you could choose a player, but it's kind of moot if you're plugging it into the system. Naturally, we have a start and select button, but the coolest feature of this to me is the slow button. If we push this, it essentially hits start over and over again. It breaks the programming down to frame-by-frame action, and if you're really in the thick of it with games like Xanac or Gradius, push that button. It's like getting an extra chance to react to things. Some call it cheating, I call it I'm having fun, get off my dick. The Advantage is off-putting, but I've actually had tons of fun with it. You do get used to the joystick rather quickly. And while we're here, let's go ahead and take a look at the NES Max. Really different, huh? Not only is it significantly smaller, it's weird. We don't have a traditional D-pad here. Instead, we have a floating, non-self-centering ring that I genuinely don't understand the purpose of. It literally only exists to affect your finger placement. You still need to push down on the black ring to move your character, at least from what I noticed, or maybe I'm just a fucking idiot. It is kind of comfortable, much more portable than the Advantage, but it lacks the ability to control the speed of your turbo, so you're locked into one speed. The buttons feel good, and the select and start, while being smaller, actually kind of fit the aesthetic. I really just couldn't get past the D-pad. This one is interesting. It's a turbo controller named the Innovation Joypad that looks a lot like the Famicom controller in Japan. It has 2 turbo fire buttons that are yellow, and the rest is as it should be. But let's look at the box for a second. See anything weird? This is 100% the box advertising for Nintendo. There's even a seal of quality knockoff in the bottom right corner. But if you look closely, it says this product is not licensed, endorsed, sponsored, or manufactured by Nintendo. So I wonder how many cease and desist letters this thing got. I can't vouch for it, but Innovation as a brand has always had dogshit quality products, most of which were knockoff controllers. So yeah, the price is equal to the quality. Well, Bishu had a zinger and a zoomer, now we have a jammer. This is basically the NES Advantage, and I'm shocked the way they got away with it. But then again, I'm not really shocked, because that's how it was back then. It's basically a ripoff of the NES Advantage, and the only thing it's lacking is that slow button I mentioned earlier. In fact, if you pay attention to the picture, you might notice a critical flaw. There is no way to engage or disengage the auto fire. It's directly tied to what the knob is. So if you want to turn it off, you literally need to pause your game, then dial the knob down, and to me, that's 100% avoided just by buying an NES Advantage. Oh, by the way, Camerica made a jammer style controller too. It's known as the Turbotronic. Same principle, same bullshit, brought to you by Camerica. This one is actually pretty cool. Another product from QuickShot, this time it's for professional players. Why? Well, it says so it has to be true. We have a comically large red joystick, a red B and A button, which between me and you, has a very low threshold when it comes to pressure. I like that, especially in games where I need to hit buttons quickly. We have a slow motion switch, and we have the ability to select whether we want to be player 1 or 2, a slider for the auto fire, and a balanced switch for the start and select. Honestly, this is not a bad accessory. Makes me wonder how this was as a price point against the Max and the Advantage. It works good too. I can't complain. I do want to point out that there was a simplified version of this controller with a D-pad. It's known as the QuickShot 157, and it's essentially the same controller but reconfigured to be a more normal controller, if that makes sense. I really didn't like the idea of the B and A buttons being slotted sideways, but I think I could get used to it. Not gonna lie, when I saw this controller, I immediately thought it was a gimmick, but then I plugged it in and, brother, this controller is oddly satisfying. The key focus of it is that this red flat area where your finger goes, and where your finger is, your character goes. Now, I'm not gonna crack this open to see how it works, but I'm assuming that there's some pressure pad or something underneath where the D-pad is, and that it's quite sensitive. The rest of the buttons do feel cheap, but if you've never experienced controlling a character without a D-pad, it's kind of unique, and I actually enjoy this. I want to check this out with other games that I like and see how it goes. Created by, well, I don't know. It's hard to find information about the TurboTech controller, but it is a Famicom-styled turbo controller. I mean, I assume it would work well. I always felt the aesthetic of Famicom controllers was more comfortable to hold than regular NES controllers. The one thing that this controller has that I haven't seen yet in others is that this controller is one of the ones with that weird screw-in joystick. Do you remember the Gravis PC gamepads? It's a lot like that. You could use the D-pad, which made sense, or you could screw in a very shitty, tiny little joystick that you would probably lose in a week. Your choice. There's another one that's like it called the Zipper, which was made by Bishu, and it's exactly the same with the weird screw-in joystick thing. Light gun stuff. Alright, let's take some time to talk about some light guns. Before we get into it, let's explain how a general light gun works. Light guns work by detecting light changes on the screen. When you pull the trigger, the screen briefly turns black and targets flash white. The zapper's photodiode sensor detects whether it sees the white target. If it does, the game registers a hit. If not, it's a miss. Everything that is a light gun is derivative on this principle. That's why light guns don't work on LCD screens or modern TVs. This thing brings back some memories of a simpler time in my life. I remember growing up playing Duck Hunt with my dad, and it was like one of 4 games we had at the time, and we would waste hours doing the same thing over and over again, and I didn't mind. And I would do anything to go back to that shitty couch my dad got from a friend with a coffee table he found on the street with Dr. Pepper and TV guides just to have the chance to look up at my dad and smile again. I never thought that I would miss that, but I do. The zapper itself, though, is a solid piece of equipment. All you need is a trigger. It works wonderfully for me. Now, your mileage might vary when it comes to these. All electronics are doomed to fail, but historically for me, I haven't had any issues with my zapper. Plug it into the second controller port and start your game. It has a very noticeable click, and that's one of the core sounds you never really forget. Told you. Then things got weird. People wanted to refine and improve the zapper. So first up, we have Konami's Laser Scope. Now, I don't own one of these, but it's been covered fairly often. Basically, it's a wearable light gun. At its core, it's a set of headphones. Not even a good one, but a headphone nonetheless. And if you choose to, you can install the laser module, which makes it a functioning light gun. How does it work? You look where you want and you say fire, and the shitty microphone may or may not shoot the gun. I found it interesting that the NES's audio jack is what powers this hunk of plastic, and it was specifically designed for a game known as Laser Invasion. And if you bought the laser scope, you'd get a $10 rebate for it. Hell yeah! Discounted stuff or money back is always cool, but there really isn't anything cool about this one. But what if you don't want to be oppressed by the crippling existence of cords? Then the Dominator Pro Beam Gun might be for you. Essentially, it's a wireless light gun. Looks kind of funky, and it has this red light behind it that beams you in your eye. But honestly, from what I've seen, especially from folks like the Gaming Historian, this actually isn't a bad gun. A wireless light gun definitely wasn't something I had on my bingo card, but apparently it works fairly well. Quality of life, I've covered wired controllers, wireless controllers, and light guns, so that leaves only two specific things: the quality of life stuff and the dumb shit. In some cases, they can be considered interchangeable, but there are certain things that were kind of cool. These in particular are accessories that would have made your gameplay experience a little bit better back in the day. Cartridges are a great gaming medium, absolutely love them, but they are also susceptible to dust. Now most of us will just blow it, because that's what we're hardwired to do. You saw your parents do it, you did it, and guess what? Now your kids will too. It's the way God intended, but it's not the way that Nintendo intended. So to answer that, there was an official cleaning kit, and it looks like this. It actually comes with two different things. The big one cleans the 72-pin connector. You just shove it in and pull it out over and over and over again.
I'll be right back. I have 5 kids. What did you expect?
The second is a game pack cleaner. Simply open up the cleaning case, then you can see where you can insert the game pack. Pretty nifty little thing, and it does its job even after all these years. Before we get to the next one, I just want to say this particular thing is weird. It's NEO. It's a homebrew device that plugs into the NES 001 expansion port on the bottom, providing expansion audio in different headers. I don't know what that means, and it's hard to find it, and to be honest, I just don't know what it does. If you were someone who wanted to explore the capabilities of the NES outside of what a general user would, then maybe see if you can find this. For the regular everyday person, this is something you can pass up on. You know what's more fun than playing games alone? Playing games with friends. But the problem was the NES natively only supported 2 controllers. In fact, the vast majority of consoles throughout history only supported 2 players. And the only way to get around that would be to use a hardware extension that was capable of providing up to 4 different players. Colloquially, this is known as the multi-tap. Now, many of you might think that the multi-tap was coined by Sony. It actually wasn't. It was coined by NEC Home Electronics for the PC Engine in 1987. But if you're my age, you'll always associate the name with Sony. Nintendo did offer 2 licensed options that were essentially multi-taps for the NES. It ultimately boiled down to if you wanted it to be plugged directly into the console or if you wanted a wireless experience. The wired variant was known as the NES 4-score. It's just a basic plug-in extender with 4 slots that allows you to choose between 2 or 4 players and the ability to turn on turbo for B or A, which is kind of cool if you're playing a shoot 'em up with a friend. The wireless option was known as the NES Satellite. Much like other wireless options, it had a receiver that would be plugged into the NES, and the transmitter, which much like the 4-score, had 4 plugins and a B&A turbo, as well as the ability to choose between controller and gun. That's kind of cool. But what if you're playing a game and it's being a massive gigafuck? Well, that's where cheating devices came into play. And out of all of the cheating devices that have ever manifested, the Game Genie is perhaps one of the most well-known. We've mentioned Codemasters before, a company started by David and Richard Darling when they were 16 and 15 respectively. That company was known as Galactic Software. If you want to learn about them, I do have a Ready Go Gaming Show special all about that, and I'll link it down below and at the end of this episode. But the Game Genie itself was created after Galactic Software became Codemasters, and it was licensed and sold by Galoob Toys. And this all stemmed from Codemasters wanting to create games for the NES, and of course Nintendo, being the assholes that they are, saying no. So the brothers said, "God blimey, Gavin, I'm gonna fuck off and make me own games." And they did, all but reverse engineering the NES development code to make Treasure Island Dizzy in 1989. The same logic was used to create the Game Genie, a hunk of shit that caused your games to spaz out to no end by affecting values on the game's coding. It crudely fits on the end of your game, you plug it in, and you hope and pray that A, the shitty plastic strap doesn't rip off, which mine did, thus resulting in me having to take my NES apart, or that it won't dislodge something. The Game Genie is very much a weird accessory, but it's one that exists in culture for a reason. The NES was a great system with an incredible library of games. The Famicom in Japan also had a significant library of awesome games, but you know who didn't? Our PAL friends. They only had about 347 licensed games on the NES, which is a shame. Over there, the Sega Master System was kicking ass on a level that the NES could not compete with. But what if you wanted to play NTSC-U, American games, on your little gray box in Europe? Well, you could, but you'd need a hardware solution. That's where the game key from Horleg, yeah, that's the name, came into play. Basically, it plugs into the NES. There's two slots, one for the game you want to play, and one that's native to the region that you're in. This effectively tricks the NES into thinking it's playing a region-appropriate game, and then boom, you're playing something totally different. There was also another company that did it as well, HES, which if you dabble in unlicensed games, you already know exactly who they are. But if you don't, HES stands for Home Entertainment Suppliers, and they are an Australian company that popped out horrifically shit unlicensed games like Arctic Adventure, Jackpot, or Duck Maze. The unit itself is known as the Unidapter, and it's horrible. You put in a massive connector which has a ribbon cable that flips up over the top of the NES and essentially does the same thing as the game key. You would need a real NES game and then whatever bullshit you wanted to play in slot 2. There was a Mark II of this, by the way, and it was far more ergonomic in design. It still looks stupid, but hey, it worked. There were a few variances of this, such as the Family Converter, Magic Key, Micro Genius, Spica T89, Game Converter, or the Wooho Cassette Adapter. If I can find a picture of any of them, I will put them there, otherwise they are very much lost to time. Gaming is something I feel everyone should have an equal opportunity to enjoy. We take living with zero disabilities for granted. You might not think you do, but I guarantee you, you do. You likely don't stop and think how lucky you are to be able to get out of bed, use the restroom yourself, cook yourself a meal, maybe go for a jog, or live what many people would consider a normal life. However, some folks don't have that luxury, and that's why specialized controllers were created to help individuals with disabilities play Nintendo games. The controller that comes to mind was the hands-free controller. The user would be able to wear it around their neck. There's a chin-controlled D-pad and a straw that the user would suck or puff air into to control A or B. Now, I will never own one of these because it's not meant for me. It would be a disservice to all the collectors to be able-bodied and own a controller specifically designed for a specific demographic. So to me, at its core, this is the best quality of life accessory out there. Dumb shit.
What's up, fools? My name is Longy Sean Jr. and I stream on Twitch. Mostly horror games because I'm obsessed with the idea of a demonic entity breaking into my conscious realm of existence. No, seriously, I stream next to a bunch of haunted stuff. I even have a haunted NES. But I've got something even more terrifying for you. The Aladdin Deck Enhancer, yeah! You see, there were unlicensed games, but Codemasters went above and beyond to give the middle finger to Nintendo after they won their lawsuit over the Game Genie. And they did it by creating a unique library tied to a unique accessory. Basically, it's an adapter for a unique library of games, most of which were created by Codemasters, like Quattro Arcade, Dizzy the Adventurer, or Big Nose Freaks Out. It's really niche, and honestly, finding one that works is a chore. It's a shame as well, because it had potential. It would be epic if there wasn't an incredibly small library and it wasn't a commercial failure. But hey, if that's the hill K-America wanted to die on, hell yeah. It's a weird, obtuse black entity which we plug the game inside of. It's a simple enhancement product that ultimately bankrupted K-America a year after its release. Alright, that's it. I'm going back to my demon cave. I'm tossing it back to you, Forte.
I have kids. You might have kids as well. And if you have kids, you already know the one thing that's guaranteed to drop a kid's grades faster than a squirrel on a grease slide are video games. It's true. I was a kid once, and my focus was constantly destroyed by the ability to A, simply not give a fuck, and B, to go play video games. Now, in my era, my dad was able to kill the internet and take my games away, but in the 80s, there was an even more passive-aggressive way to keep your kids from playing their NES. A fucking lock, courtesy of Master Lock. I'd actually buy this, but I'm not paying $100 for that. Fuck that. Speaking of internet, did you know that the NES was going to have the ability to use the internet? Bear in mind, the internet in the 80s was mostly just ARPANET, NSFNet, non-commercial stuff that at the most consisted of 2400 baud. If you were really lucky, it went up to 9600 baud, or about 9.6 kilobytes per second. But the NES was supposed to have not one, but two different modems. The first was supposed to be commercially available, the Teleplay modem, which was created to run at 300 bits per second, hopefully with the intention of playing games online, and that never manifested. But the other one, that's the holy grail of bullshit. a modem created solely for the Minnesota State Lottery, and a game that matched it. Basically, you could buy lottery tickets. There's actually a guy who owns it on Reddit right now, and he worked with the Video Game History Foundation to bypass the parental lock, so fingers crossed, we'll see the source code very soon. Well, this is probably the most strange and abstract controller to receive mainstream popularity. After all, it was in quite a few movies. The Wizard, it was even mentioned in Nightmare on Elm Street, one of them. It's a wearable glove, it has a sensor on it, and a little control panel. That was basically an NES-style controller, just convoluted to high heavens. There were only 2 games created for it specifically, Super Glove Ball and Bad Street Brawler. There were 2 more that were announced, but they never came to fruition. Probably because this thing was a heaping load of shit. You see, most people only know about the glove itself, but there's more to it. There's a weird box setup you have to do as well, and I don't own one. And personally, I don't think it's worth the $130 it would take to buy one. Oh well. Rob is not only a controller peripheral, he is a cultural icon. The robotic operating buddy was created for 2 games, Gyromite and Stack Up, and he works just like a light gun. The creator Gunpei Yokoi, the same dude who created the Game Boy, filed the patent under the pretense that Rob was a photo-sensing video game control system. And guess what? It's actually pretty neat. I think out of all the dumb shit that's under the dumb shit category, this is one that I would eventually want to nab, but it can be expensive. There's a lot of pieces you need to get Rob working, and the games themselves can get pretty expensive as well. Well, if you've seen the Nerds episode talking about NES accessories, then you might recognize the Pressman Speedboard. The whole idea is that it puts the speed of your fingertips, but in reality, it's just a piece of plastic. It existed with the sole idea that it would make it easier to hit the buttons faster, and as someone who does that occasionally for games that require it, I can see the logic behind it. But you could get the same effect from just putting the controller on your desk and pushing down. It doesn't last long either, but hey, at least it was endorsed by Kyle Petty. I know we just mentioned a hunk of plastic that does fuck all with the speedboard, but that was for your hands. The rock and roller is for your feet. It was created by LJN and basically functions solely as the D-pad. That's right, you're holding the controller in your hand, but fuck the D-pad. I want to stand on the D-pad, which would be cool if it worked, but it doesn't. Literally everyone I know that's used it complains about just how shit it is. Supposedly it works for all games except light gun games, but I've never seen one function correctly. So this is a super chair. It's a chair. Put it together, lean the direction you want to go, grab the Mad Max fucking controllers on the edge of the poles, and do business. I was looking into it, then I found this comment string. Pretty sure someone had sex in this thing. Super sex! Power sex! Now you're playing with power. Now you're fucking with power. It's a silly little controller, seems like a workout to play with too, but hey, that's what you're into, more power to you. I think aesthetically it just looks really stupid. Just a bunch of pipes in a stadium seat. This one is kinda cool though, for the wrong reasons. This is the U-Force. It's a folding contraption released by Broderbund that one would buy if holding a controller in any capacity was just not fun for you, which for me, has never been the case, unless I'm playing DDR or something that relies on my body to control it. The idea is that it uses infrared receivers to sense the motion of what you're doing. One hand would control the D-pad, the other would control their A or B button. I don't own one and I've been trying to get my hands on one for a while, but I just can't justify spending the money for it. It came with 2 adapters as well. One was a power bar that you could use for Punch-Out, and the other was a flying yoke for games like Top Gun. Now if you want a full review of this, the nerd did it. He can afford dropping $160 on something that may or may not work, but I'm not big on wishful thinking. This one is the most confusing thing I've ever purchased. This is the Super Controller, and basically what it is a chastity cage for your controller. The whole idea is that Bandai wanted something that would expand the capabilities of the D-pad, and nothing else. So how did they do that? They created a shitty piece of plastic that acts as a cage that covers your controller, making it less comfortable to hold, but hey, at least the D-pad can be converted into an arcade stick, which to me makes no sense. At the time, an arcade stick was available on countless other accessories, such as the NES Advantage, and even then, I'm not a huge fan of that, because it's just too damn big. Oh well. Our final accessory today is just another hunk of plastic, the Quick Shot Sighting Scope. Now we all know there was absolutely nothing wrong with the Zapper. If you had a zapper out of the box as a kid, A, it was accurate, and B, it worked perfectly fine. And to be honest, the only times I missed the duck playing Duck Hunt as a kid is because I didn't know how to aim the gun. I was 6. Sorry that pistols weren't in my repertoire. But I didn't suck at the game so bad that I needed a plastic scope that served zero purpose other than looking cool. And that's it for today's episode. What did you think of this list? What NES accessories do you remember as a kid? Feel free to let the community know down in the comments section below. Who knows, maybe you'll share an interesting memory with someone else. Speaking of our community, if you made it to the end of this episode, you're already home with us. We're a gathering of video game enthusiasts that love to remember when life was a little bit easier to live. And if you align with that, feel free to subscribe. Finally, the single most important thing you could do for me is to hit that thumbs up button, as it directly affects the visibility of the projects and the videos that I work on every single day. As always, from my family to your family, good energy, good vibes. Fortifier out.